Welcome to Everything EFL. My name's Erin O'Byrne, and I firmly believe that you as a teacher are special, amazing, creative and passionate. But it's very easy to get burnt out and overwhelmed. With my podcast and my teacher training, I aim to help you avoid burnout and cut down on your prep time so you can unleash your creativity and enjoy your work more mindfully. Are you ready? Let's go! Hello, you gorgeous teacher. If you're one of my gorgeous, lovely regular listeners, welcome back. If you're brand new to Everything EFL, you are most welcome, and I hope you stick around. You have landed slap bang in the middle of my Cornerstones of Learning series. Now, that's grand. You can just jump right in if you want, but it might be worth going back to episode 104 to get everything out of this series. So the idea behind this series, if you don't already know, is to give you just a little snapshot of all the things that I think are super important to learning. And I'm not just talking about how to teach grammar and all of that. I'm talking about, putting heart and soul into your lessons and making your students better humans. I mean, surely this is only beneficial for you, right? And, much as I love students and I love my students, and I'm sure your students are gorgeous and amazing, I care more about you, my darling teacher. So that's what these episodes are all about. So anyway, let's jump right in for today. We are talking about relevance, linking information and your lessons to your students' world. Now, I'm going to say this straight away. I cannot take the credit for 99.9% of this. This episode is based on a brilliant presentation I saw at TESOL Spain in Madrid this year. Guy's name is James Seymour, and I'm quoting directly from his presentation, also from his website. I throw in a couple of ideas of my own, of course, but this is basically all him. And I will put his website, High Impact English, link in the show notes so you can go and have a look for yourself, because everything I say is going to be on there, but with a little bit more information. All right? Everything I'm going to say is especially useful for monolingual classrooms. If you're teaching in your own country, or if you are in another country teaching a monolingual class, using what's around you and that kind of shared cultural knowledge. However, if you are teaching in a multilingual classroom like myself, it can be a bit trickier, but take the same principles and find common ground and shared experiences among your students. What do they know about the place they are living in? Who do they all know? That kind of thing. So why are we doing this? Why are we making our lessons relevant to our students? Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? We learn language by forming connections in our brain, and those connections are to things we already know, real world connections to language, the things that, we see, we hear, and are, relevant to us. The benefits, very clear, a lot more engagement and interest. The students will have more to say if you are dealing with familiar topics, places, interests. And without it, the students are just not going to see the point of what you're learning. And a great example of this, I think, is when I did maths. Now, maths would probably be my worst subject, again, because I didn't see the point of it. But I remember when we learned algebra, and I was just like, what are we doing this for? My teacher didn't explain how I could apply this in any kind of real world context. Therefore, it meant nothing to me. Therefore, couldn't do it very well. And therefore, now if you asked me to do a very simple equation, I wouldn't have a frickin' clue. Okay, enough of my personal issues. Let's get going. So let's keep it local. Can you find pictures of local shops, schools, parks? These things can turn abstract topics into something tangible that your students have personal experience of, and also opinions that they genuinely want to share. So find pictures of shops, streets, parks, things like that. Go to Google Images. You can find all of the things on there. Google Maps as well can be very handy for this kind of thing. You can use that street view function. You can do really simple things like present simple. I often go to this place here. Obviously, prepositions of place. You could cut up the shops and, get students to put them in the order using the prepositions. They can just have general conversations about their favourite shops, places they go, places they hang out. What was the last thing they bought? If somebody else in the class bought the same thing, comparing and contrasting, fast food places or clothes shops or supermarkets. They could rank these things in order of preference or how often they go there. Obviously, directions is a great one, but, instead of using that random map in your course book or what you find on the internet, use your own town. Surely that makes sense. Music. Okay, look, this is something that most students will respond really well to. Now, a lot of teachers don't have a huge amount of time to go through a song and analyze it and do all these different exercises. So the suggestion here is look for a catchy song that's, kind of in right now that your students are going to know. If you're not sure, why don't you ask them for suggestions and focus on a short section or the chorus, the bit that everybody knows, because they probably have one or two ideas of a few words, but they will be so interested in actually learning it. And then you could drill this particular phrase or section, and then the students will hear it when they encounter the song again. I mean, it's so simple, but it just shows your students that you're tapping into their lives a little bit. And I think they'll really appreciate that. You could also do something really simple like, every week or even every lesson, depending on the time you have. Students can present to their class their favourite song and why they love it. They could just do a spoken 30-second presentation. It doesn't have to be long. They could do it just in groups. But the beautiful thing is you could send them away with a link to the song, or if you have time in class, they could all watch the video or watch the lyric video together. You could also create a class playlist, and what better thing to do? The students are doing all of the work. You could combine it with some kind of language point like, I absolutely love this because, or I really love this because, or, oh, well, this isn't my cup of tea. You could introduce something kind of, these little chunks that students could use while either presenting or comparing or giving their opinions on these things. The next thing is famous faces. Who do your students all know? Can you make flashcards with your students' favourite famous people on them? Fantastic for comparisons. Shakira is better than Beyonce, said no one ever. Dolly Parton is the best human being alive. That kind of thing. You could use both, Messi and Salah both have lots of money. They could have general conversations about these people, like, why do I like this person? Why don't I like this person? Or again, introducing little chunks like, I know this person well, or I don't really know that much about this person, or this person is my absolute favourite. I mean, there are so many little chunks you can do here. It doesn't necessarily have to be a grammar point like comparisons. It could be giving your students chunks of language to use while talking about or describing these people. Sports, I always find this a bit tricky because not everybody's into sports. But think about sporting events. They are often a source of interest to kids, teens. Again, the trick is to know your audience. But the thing is as well, if half the class aren't really into sports or a particular event that much and the other half are, there is a genuine information gap there. You could find some interesting images of a major sporting event. And there are a couple of options here that James Seymour puts on his website. The first option is if you have a picture of like a sporting event or like a good still image of something with lots of action. Student A describes the image to student B, who has to draw it without looking. You could also put some language on the board you would like them to use just to help them. And obviously make it clear that, the goal isn't creating a masterpiece, but accuracy. And stickmen are great for this kind of thing if their arms and legs are in the right position, depending on what the description is. Option 2, now I hope I'm going to describe this clearly enough, but I think it's a fantastic idea. Thank you, James. So let's imagine student A describes an image in as much detail as possible to student B. Then you can reveal a series of lexical items, and student B then gives their partner a point or a poker chip for each lexical item that they mentioned. Now, obviously, you could clue your students in lessons before that. You could say, we might be using this tomorrow, or, before the activity, you could say, oh, remember what we've done this week, or something like that. And you could include linkers like, because, or intensifiers like incredibly, like he looks incredibly frustrated, or he looks incredibly happy or something. And what happens is if you play this more than once, the students will then really try to predict the linkers and intensifiers because they want those points. And what happens is they will create more complex sentences without you begging for them. And also, if you're thinking, well, how are they ever going to predict, obviously just help them a little bit before you do the exercise, and also include ones time and time again that they know are going to come up, especially ones that are maybe a little bit more complex or just really nice chunks like incredibly happy. I think that's a genius idea. And lastly, video games. Again, you can use these for so many different reasons. There are some activities on James Seymour's website that include video games, because I know they're huge with certain students. But again, just in general terms, comparisons, just chatting about the ones they like, anything new, can they recommend, how do you play this game? You could do some imperative work. There are so many different things you can do with video games. And this is the great thing, once you get into the rhythm of this might unleash your creativity a little bit, because I think sometimes what is missing from teachers is not creativity per se, because I think we are all creative, but I think that the sort of the time restrictions and some of the sort of curriculum pressure sometimes, doesn't leave room or headspace for that creativity. But if you get to know your students and you get to know what they like, and just sort of throwing a few of those well-known video game titles in there for them to discuss in a particular way, you might see your students light up like you've never seen them light up before. But at the very least, give it a try. You have absolutely nothing to lose by trying something a little bit new or a little bit different. And I think that 9 times out of 10, it does pay off. And if it's that 1 out of 10 time when it doesn't, who gives a shit? This is life. Sometimes we try new things and they fly. Sometimes they absolutely bomb. We reflect, we learn, we move on. And I suppose another thing, another way just to make things a little bit more relevant for your students is when you are giving example sentences for a grammar point or for definitions, just use language and a situation that your students are going to relate to. So, one example is, let's imagine, you're teaching managed to do something, which is basically something that you do or achieve, but it's kind of difficult, right? So if you have like a group of teenagers who don't have a job, right, but all go to school, which example sentence would be better to give them? The traffic was terrible, but I managed to get to work. Or the traffic was terrible, but I managed to get to school on time, right? Just little things like that, because I think all of us can relate to bad traffic and trying to get somewhere on time, right? And what I've started doing as well is to create like very little sort of 2-line dialogues when I'm demonstrating a language point. It just gives it a more real-world situation. And again, I'll try to use languages and situations that will be directly relevant to my students and their lives. At the very least, just you can do 1 line or sentence, but put it in quotation marks, in speech marks, and make it look very conversational, and try to make it sound like it comes straight out of a conversation that your students might be having. Okay, so look, I'm sure there are millions more ideas. In fact, I know there are, and I'm sure you guys use them. Let me know. I'd be so happy to hear about it, and I'd, be really happy to put them on my stories and in my newsletter. By the way, if you want to join my newsletter community, Breathe Easy Teacher, I will leave the link in my show notes. And we will finish with the challenge. The challenge. Okay, so I have done this. So I've spoken to a lot of teachers this summer about this very topic of relevance. And I've asked my teachers to answer the following questions. And I would like you to answer the following questions as well. So you can either write them down or you can just listen, pause, and scribble down the answers, all right? So your challenge for this week is to answer these questions. What famous people do your students know, like, follow, or idolize? Who do they watch or listen to? What are they watching on Netflix at the moment? What are their main hobbies and interests? Where do they hang out and who with? Can you name at least 3 or 4 fast food places or cafes your students go to? What video games do they play? What games do they play on their mobiles? Have you heard them talking about or singing any particular songs? if you don't know answers to these questions, maybe that's a good conversation to have with your students. And the beauty of all of these things are they are conversational. You can ask the questions in a very normal, natural way at some point in your lessons and try and get as much information as you can from your students. The more you know your students, the more you can connect what you do in class to their lives. And you might find that if your students are lacking in motivation, which seems to be one of the biggest issues, especially in mainstream schools when I chat to my teachers, this is a thing that comes up time and time again, motivation. Are they interested in what you're delivering? And I'm not saying you're doing a bad job, but is the content you're delivering relevant to them? Can they see the connection between their lives and what they already know and what you're trying to teach them? So I just want you to think about that. Like I've said before, this series, Cornerstones of Learning, it's all about giving you food for thought and making just small changes to your teaching step by step, small steps to better teaching. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it there for today. I really hope you have a great week. Please think about what I've said and please keep in contact with me. I would love to know how you're doing in this Cornerstones challenge. Or even if you've just listened to one or two of these episodes, give me some feedback. Let me know what you think. Have you taken any of the challenges? Have you made any small steps to make your teaching better and to make your life easier? Because that's what I am all about. I am all about making your life easier. Okay, so if you feel that you have got some use out of this or any of my podcast episodes, please recommend me to a colleague. Share one of my links. Share one of my social media posts or my stories. You can subscribe to Everything EFL on any platform you like. You can join my newsletter, like I said. The link is in the show notes. And the best thing you can do, guys, is if you are listening or if you're a regular listener, take the ideas you hear and try and incorporate them into your teaching. This is how you're going to become a better teacher. Keep in contact with me, email me, DM me. I love talking to you guys and I love helping you. But until then, have a lovely, safe, peaceful week. Look after yourself and share the love. Bye.